right, well, we're not pushing this thing up into the lift bay by ourselves. We've got an idea. All right, let's give it a shot. Doesn't have the torque. Okay, might have to try a different approach here. Try to do it the easy way. We're gonna have to break out the big guns. Sometimes the more difficult option is the easier one. Well, as you can probably tell, we are diving back to work on the old K24 Cefiro build. I am excited to get back into the meat of this project. We got more fab stuff to do. Fab projects are my absolute favorite. So last episode, we built our squirrely do pie cut down pipe. Now, I'll be honest, the main reason for doing this down pipe, mostly out of pie cuts, was for aesthetics, for the challenge, for the fun of it. I wanted to do a pie cut down pipe. But there is more of a reason for that. When you use the pie cuts, you're kind of able to work in 3 dimensions. We're able to get this pipe to fit pretty much exactly how we want it, which is nice when we're working in a tight area, trying to keep it away from the brake master and the clutch master and shoot between the steering shaft and the block. So there is some functionality behind doing it this way. Yes, it's a lot more work, but hey, I really just wanted to. So we've got that done. The downpipe's done. It's all welded up. It fits great. The next thing we need to do is build out the whole exhaust. But before that, I want to go ahead and build the wastegate dump. So the wastegate, we've got the dump pointing down. Now we can orient this any way we want, but I think that's going to be our best bet. We need to go from A to B. B being somewhere in the downpipe in the direction of flow. We can't have it just go straight in because then it might fight itself and cause boost creep and all sorts of other issues. It needs to kind of come in the direction that the exhaust is already flowing. So it's definitely going to be challenging. Now, the easier solution would be to just run an open dump and run a pipe. Some people do it out the hood, run it down near the ground, and just let it vent to atmosphere. But thing number one, this is a street car. That's the goal, is for this to be a good street car, number one. And don't get me wrong, that's a hard line for me to toe because I've always built cars purely for function. I'm not worried about it being comfortable to drive on the street, but that is kind of the purpose of this car, to be a comfortable street car that drifts. So there's that, and two, I just don't like open wastegate dumps on lower powered cars. I just don't think it sounds that good. On a high horsepower car where it's opening and then it's getting a limiter, it's snatching the rev super quick, it sounds so cool, it sounds violent. But on a lower powered car, it just kind of sounds like a big exhaust leak sometimes. So anyway, moral of the story is it's going to be a lot more challenging to recircuit like we're going to do, but I think it'll be worth it. So that's enough jibber jabber about what we're going to do. It's time to just start doing it. Let's get to work. Man, I gotta say, being in this shop, fabricating up some parts, cutting, grinding, welding, it's my happy place. I am so eager always to do more fab projects. I love it. Happy place. All right, so here's pretty much where we're at. Now, obviously, we can rotate this and we can rotate the wastegate, but that puts us down a little more, which gets tricky with the steering shaft. I mean, we almost might be able to go straight in if we set it up right. I've got another idea I want to try first though. All right, option number 2. I know it looks silly now. Instead of having this here, we'd finish probably the curve and then put the flex joint. So the benefit to doing it this way, one, we would very easily be able to kind of match the flow of the exhaust and not have to worry about back pressuring the wastegate and having any issues there. 2, serviceability, we could pull the downpipe off as one unit, no problem. Just undo this V-band, undo this V-band. If we have it flipped around where it's underneath, it's not likely that we're gonna be able to pull the downpipe off without removing the wastegate too. Now, yeah, you're not pulling the downpipe off that often, but I don't know. Serviceability is always a big thing for me. So I'm gonna cut some pieces and just kind of get an idea of what this would look like. All we gotta do is a little, basically an angled piece and then a coat piece. I mean, it's gonna be 2 dimension of fit up, but dude, to be honest, I like the way that looks. It's one of those things, and it's more functional, you know? More functional. I think I'm going for that, rather than the underneath route. This is definitely one of those things we're gonna have to tack on the car, but figure I'll tape it up just to hold it in place before I tack it. I definitely don't want to tack it until we got the last piece cut. The last piece is going to be elaborate, that's for sure, but we'll start tinkering. All right, well, we've got it all mocked up. We've got it fitting pretty good. We've got pretty good fit up most of the way around. You can't really see it, but on the back side, back here, there's a gap. Now I cut a less aggressive angle into one, tried that, that wasn't happening. I tried to cope this one, so just a rough cope to see if that would do it. Anyway, I think that's about as good a fit up as we're gonna get. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start tacking this together. Now, obviously we can't tack this to the downpipe yet because we still got to cut the hole in the downpipe for it. But I want to get this all tacked together and then mark out the hole for that. But I'm happy with the looks of this. It looks really cool. Yeah, looks snazzy. One of the beautiful things about the new welder, you can easily roll it around. And the Bluetooth pedal. All right, well, it's a little windy, so this is not gonna be super easy. All right, well, that was more of a struggle than it should have been, but we got it done. All right, here it is all welded out. Definitely not my best work. Just kind of tricky, I guess because it was so small. But it's welded, it's one piece. Let's toss it back in, see if it still fits good, or if we need to do some massaging to this guy. All right, well, it's in there. Still fits good, still got good fit up where we're gonna weld it. It is gonna be a bit tricky to weld because it's 2 pieces, you know? So even if we tack it, the chances of it moving likely. We're gonna have to try to get like a decent bit of weld going with it in the car, honestly, just so it doesn't move on us, because if the weight's there and you start welding and it wants to warp one way, it's gonna warp that way. But we're getting close. It's honestly gone pretty dang smoothly, I must say. So yeah, anyway, mark this out, cut the hole for it, weld her up. Oh yeah, should easily be able to get it out as one unit. All right, I could use the plasma cutter for this, but it's gonna be messy. So I'm gonna try to do it the clean way. I've marked out basically the right location to start. We're just gonna drill it out, and hopefully we can use the stepper bit. Stainless isn't the easiest thing to drill through. It's a very hard material. So this may or may not work, but the plasma cutter is just gonna leave a freaking mess. As you can see, not going very well. So I guess we can try to plasma cut just right real tight on the inside. Just gonna make a mess. And that was definitely efficient. About the right size of a hole too. We'll clean it up with the die grinder. The hole actually came out better than I thought. We got it just to before the line because obviously the line is the outside edge. We need some meat to weld to, but we want it to also be as big as possible, so there's as minimal restriction as we can have. But overall, I mean, that went pretty smoothly. No carbide burr, got it cleaned up nice. Plasma cutter made short work of it, but we did get some slag on the inside, so I've cleaned most of it up where I could get the die grinder in there, but I'm gonna go in with a wire brush as well and just try to knock the rest of that slag off. But otherwise, we're ready to toss this back on, get the dump tube back in place, and tack it together in the car. Exciting stuff. All right, I welded as much as I could in the car. Basically got to strip down this side, strip down this side. This has a little bit of a gap and the torch hits the engine before I can really get a good angle at it. So I'm not gonna weld that out. I mean, I think that's enough to hopefully keep it in position. So at this point, we just gotta pull it out and send it. All right, it's done. I welded in a filler piece for this backside with the gap, and I just weaved over it just because. So now we just gotta let it cool down enough to put it back on, hope it all fits good, and then we can start building out the rest of the exhaust from here on back, which that's gonna require a lot of tacking in the car. That's why I haven't put the welder back yet. All right, moment of truth, does it still fit? Oh, dude, like perfect. I didn't even have to line it up. I had to loosen and tighten it a couple times just to get it centered between the steering shaft and the engine. We don't have a lot of room down there. Since we're gonna build the rest of the exhaust, I wanted to make sure it airs on the side of the engine. That way we don't ever end up with it rubbing against our steering shaft. But check it out, dude. It's all done. At least these welds came out nice. The underside, I mean, it was all right. None of this was my best welding ever. I should have tried a little harder. But overall, dude, I'm happy with that. I knew that was gonna be a challenging project to get everything to fit back right and get the hole cut right, and yeah. That is sick. Sweet. All right, downpipe is officially done. Man, I love looking at this stuff. This has gotta be my favorite build to date that I've done, just because of all the fab work. I love the Fummins build for what it represents. I love the LS Miata for that too. It was my first big power drift car, and you know, having a car that could bake the tires off in third, and I've done so much to that car over the years. But this is just like taking everything I've learned from all the different cars and vehicles I put together, all the progression and learning how to fabricate things and putting it all in one. So I don't know. Anyway, super fun, man. I love it. I love it. All right, cool. That's done. I'm gonna quit jibber jabbering about it, and we're gonna move underneath and start building the rest of the exhaust. All right, we've got the other side of the V-band clamped in here, and this is what we're gonna be building from after the downpipe. You can see how tight it is. Boom, barely a finger there, barely a finger to the steering shaft there. So when I tacked the downpipe together, before I welded it out, I got this piece cut to fit just to make sure everything was gonna line up good. Angles were gonna be right to keep this thing straight and keep it tucked up as high as possible. I wanted to do that before I welded out the downpipe, but we are gonna have to make some modifications to this because we need to add in a flex joint. So it would have been nice to put it in the downpipe, but the only spot was that straight section up there, which it's very tight, as you can see, to the runners. And the other reason I didn't do it that way was because if it has flex down here, it can flex into the transmission or into the steering shaft. It can move around, ding off things, grind off things. We need this to be fixed just because of how tight everything is that it goes around. But from here, we want some flex. That way when the exhaust moves around, it doesn't translate that movement into cracking the manifold, cracking the downpipe, things like that. That's why you need a flex joint. All right, well, we got this mocked up in here. Got the welder out here so we can tack it. It's funny, I almost forgot that I have a welder plug that I put on the lift for this reason. Drug my extension cord out and then was like, wait a second, I planned for this. I think that's about as good as it's gonna get without getting way overcomplicated. So I'm gonna go ahead and just send it, tack that out, and then we can start building from there. We're basically gonna go up to the right, straighten it out, keep it tucked up here, but not too high. You don't wanna cook the boot. All right, well, here's what we've got. We got some pie cuts to get this straightened out, angled up just a tiny bit to back here. And then we've got it angling over slightly throughout the whole length. So then we should be able to do just one last little jog to get between the diff and the subframe here up tight close to the axle. So I think I'm good with that. I just need to go ahead and tack it all. At least get a couple tacks on before it falls apart. Tape is not meant to carry this kind of weight. The weight of this thing. All right, well, we got this thing all tacked together. I just wanted to pull it out and get a bunch more tacks on it. There's a lot of weight on these joints here, but we got surprisingly good fit up everywhere. I mean, we've got a little gap there, a little gap there. But overall, for tacking it in the car and such long pieces on either end, I'm really stoked on how tight everything fits up. So we're going to toss it back in there, make sure it still looks like it fits good and is going where we want to go, and then go from there. All right, sweet. Well, I'm really happy with how that's fitting. We've got some leeway as to what we can do, but that's basically with it pretty close to the trans mount. We get nice and tight up here. Fit up is good all around. We got plenty of clearance in the drive shaft still. So I think we're gonna go ahead and pull that out, weld it out just so it's done and dusted. Oh, we're out of argon, that's the problem. I was like, man, the flow is like 15 CFH, should be, or like 14, should be 20. We're out of argon. Luckily, I have a small bottle I can swap on before I go get that one filled so we don't have to stop progress. The welds just weren't looking very colorful, kind of gray and bland, and it didn't sound like there was that much argon coming out. All right, we got the bottle of gas from my multi-process welding cart set up on here. It looks so tiny. It actually kind of fits better because it's like the height of the welder, but I mean, I went through that bigger bottle. That's a 120, and it can't be more than a month and a half, which obviously for a fab shop, you go through these like crazy, but there's a guy building some stuff for basically one car in his garage. I guess 2 cars. I went through that pretty fast. So anyway, we got this bottle. It should be pretty, yeah, it's pretty full. So that'll last us. I don't want to run this one down. I want to go get the other one filled, swap it back on so I don't have to go fill this one. And I can put it back on that cart. But anyway, back to welding. This is the worst part about building exhaust, is welding them, because they're always in awkward shape and it's really difficult to get them in a position where you can get all the way around. Tricky, and you're always like, is it gonna fall, is it gonna fall? But I think we got it good. We got 3 clamps holding it up. All right, all of our welding is done. The reason for putting this clamp on here with the other side of the V-band is just to try to prevent this V-band from warping. One, you've got something kind of flat holding it that you're not welding to. 2, it's a lot more material for the heat to dissipate into, because it does require a lot more heat to weld this than the butt joints. But yeah, these V-bands are always so fun to weld because it's really easy to make them look super nice. I don't know if you can see, there are a couple of bobbles where I went over the tacks, but it's just because it's a groove, the rod just falls in there. So anyway, we got it all welded. Assuming I didn't miss any spots, I haven't really looked. I think we're good. So let's toss it back in there. Sweet, so what we need to do from here, since this piece is so long, is build some sort of a mount. I think I'm gonna V-band it here. This is kind of a good spot to V-band it because the back half's gonna be heavier with the muffler, but it'll be a little bit shorter. So this is a good midway point. This is also pretty high up. We still got clearance to the drive shaft, but we're definitely well above the frame rail, so we don't have to worry as much about the V-band scraping the ground. So I think this is a good spot to throw a V-band on it and then have the back half disconnectable. So it'll be a 2-piece overall system plus the downpipe. But again, I want to mount it first. I need to come up with some sort of good mounting solution here. I think I've got a rough idea of what I want to do, but we just don't have any hanger points. Not until like pretty much the end. All right, so here's what we're gonna build our mount out of. This flat bar and this piece of 3-inch intercooler piping. If this works out like I think it should come out pretty decent and be a solid mount, but we're only gonna know if we try. So let's start, let's get this cut, start bending it. All right, pretty solid, not perfect. I had to overbend this one because basically, because of this bend, I couldn't get this bend where I wanted it. I couldn't go in far enough, so I had to bend it a little bit longer, which would have put it a little lower. So you get the idea. But once it's bolted in there, it should be good. It's tight because we need to be right above the exhaust. We don't want to go any lower, but we can't go much higher because we'll hit the drive shaft. So anyway, pretty happy with that for just eyeball bending it with a little bit of a cardboard template. All right, now's the part where it's gonna get even weirder. Some of you may already know where we're going with this. Some of you may not, but you'll see. It'll make sense. All right, so here's basically my plan on how this is gonna work. I had to make a little bit longer piece, but we've got it B-rolled. I'm gonna weld it to this mount, and then we will clamp the exhaust to it. So that'll allow the exhaust to move. It's not a solid fixed mount with a weld, but it's pretty solid. It's not gonna bounce around like a stock rubber mount would. We'll have stock rubber mount here at the back, but for here, this kind of midship one, I wanted to make it a little bit stronger, a little bit stiffer, a little bit sturdier. Especially with this mount being aluminum, it can bow and bend just a little bit just to keep everything kind of loosey-goosey in the exhaust system. So I'm not gonna use T-bolt clamps like this. This was just a test to make sure that the piece was long enough with the bead rolls as far out as possible. I just did those so if the clamp loosens up, it won't easily just slide off in the exhaust fall. So yeah, anyway, the most difficult part here is for sure gonna be just getting it tacked in the car because it's such a specific orientation. We can't really risk tacking it out of the car. So more in-car tacking. That's the name of the game with exhaust stuff. You gotta tack it in the car for it to fit right. So I'm gonna do that. We'll pull it out, we'll weld it out, and then we will clamp it all in and see how it looks. All right, I gotta say, I am pretty happy with that. Luckily, I had normal worm clamps. I didn't think I did, but I found them super rigid. That's just it against the body there, but it's honestly a lot more rigid than I thought. It's sturdy. Moral of the story, easy to service. You can either unbolt it there, undo the clamps, slide them, boom, drop it down. And the fitment, dude, I am hyped on the fitment. So, you know, that's why tacking it in the car was important because I needed to get the distance left to right correct. And that's bending this was important because, you know, this dictates the height of this, which dictates how close it is to this. So anyway, I'm just happy it all fits. We've got like an 1/8 inch up top and like an 1/8 inch there. And since we have a nice firm mount, it shouldn't move enough to rattle. So, whoo, this has been fun, man. It's funny when that mount took longer than I expected, but when a project's going the way you want it to go, even if it's taking longer, it's, for me at least, it's like, it doesn't bother me. What bothers me is when it takes longer and it's worse than you expected, like the results. But yeah, I think that is where we're going to end it. This next part's going to be kind of its own project. We'll probably V-band it here. It's going to be kind of elaborate through here to keep it tucked up to the axle to maintain as much ground clearance as possible. Then boom, muffler here. I also have to order some rubber hangers because I forgot that we had to cut this one to get the exhaust off. We'll have to build something for this as well. So it's going to be its own project. And I got a couple other things to do as well that I'm pretty excited about. So we'll save that for next video. We'll knock that out next video and we'll be done and dusted with the exhaust. But man, this thing has come together so well. I am so freaking hyped on how this is all coming together. So anyway, I'm gonna stop jibber jabbering on here. I'm gonna let you guys go work on your own car, watch the next video, do whatever you want to do. But for now, that's gonna be it. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, goodbye.